Just wanted to discuss some things with you guys. The reality of, I guess, when you finally, come to that point where you cannot stay married anymore for whatever reason. Maybe you've tried for years. Maybe it's just not something you want anymore. Maybe you are exhausted because you've been treated horribly and nothing's changing. But for whatever reason, you've decided to take that plummet, right? You've decided to go ahead and start a new life. And the problem is if you have children. Okay, so today we're going to talk pretty much about, I would say, custody battles, parental alienation, divorces, right? How do you handle your divorce? And I will say, I used to practice family law as an attorney across the entire state. A lot of the cases that I had was predominantly after the divorce was finalized and parents could not get it together. They couldn't get along. And they would come back to try to modify what their final judgment from their divorce had said because it just wasn't working. And there was just, they weren't able to get along and definitely not able to make decisions regarding the children. Well, I'm going to start at the divorce because the divorce and how one gets a divorce sets the stage for what's to come after that divorce. And I can tell you right now, I could tell you guys story after story. It's nightmares for people's lives. They're pretty much, they're like in a life sentence to their former spouse, and the kids are used as the controlling weapon. But that doesn't always have to be that way. And here's the problem. By the time somebody has come to the point where they want to get a divorce, it's usually because they really couldn't communicate or get along while they were married. So how in the world, if they can't communicate and get along while they're married, how are they going to do this when they're going through a divorce, let alone after a divorce, whether they're co-parenting or whatever the situation is? So it is a difficult thing to expect these parents to change and all of a sudden become parents that can now suddenly communicate. Because if they could do that, they would have done that in the marriage, and the marriage probably wouldn't have failed. However, I'm here to tell you that it is your time to change when you're going through a divorce. It is your time to really, if you're leaving a marriage because there's too much, say, baggage, and there's too much resentment and you just can't get past it. Your time to change is during that divorce, because I'll tell you what ends up happening. If you continue the same anger, the same animosity, the same resentment towards your spouse while you're going through a divorce, chances are you're going to do everything that you can to hurt that person. And usually the easiest tool is the tool of the children, right? So you will see oftentimes where parents will go into full-fledged custody battles. And it's really, when you get down into what it really means, it's about power and control. A lot of times one spouse is built with so much hurt and pain that it turns, to anger, and it's revenge time now. It's revenge. I told you if you didn't change that I'm going to divorce you and I'm going to do this to you. So just watch it happen. Ha ha ha, right? It's that I told you so. It's, you should have changed and done what I wanted while you were married, but because you didn't now, I'm going to have my field day with you during this divorce, and I'm going to make you pay for the pain that you did to me, because now you get to go on with your life. And guess what? I have to start over, right? When I say it's a woman, I've been at home with the kids and I have not focused on my career while you have, right? Or say that you find out that your partner cheated on you, something like that. It's always about just whatever they can do to get that revenge back on that parent. Well, here's what's so foolish. Okay, here's what's really foolish. Take it from me, a former divorce attorney, you could settle, if two people could just get past that anger, you can settle a divorce with $5,000, sometimes less than that, if you're able to sit down and write a settlement agreement out together, and understand nobody wins in these situations. If you want a settlement agreement, everybody is going to take a loss in some capacity. The question is, how much of a loss are you going to take? But if you can get past your anger and you recognize that the way you treat your divorce is going to set the stage for the remainder of your child's childhood while you're co-parenting, okay, then you are 10 steps ahead, and you've just saved yourself over 18 years of legal fees and animosity and stress and your child's welfare, because promise you, it does come out with your children eventually. So my advice to everybody, when people would come to me, first of all, I always believed, I always wanted to save marriages. So when people would come to me asking me to be their family law attorney, I would really have to vet them, because I wasn't there to destroy. If people had an ounce of ability to salvage that marriage, that's what I was always looking for first. Because most of the time it's cookie cutter why people get divorced. You always hear the same story. It's always communication. It's always, the woman's always feeling invalidated. The man is not feeling respected. It's the same thing over and over again. So, the problem is that if it goes too long without getting fixed, then resentment builds in, and it's very, very difficult for people to get past that. Okay. And then what happens is there's unreasonable expectations of change. And when that doesn't happen fast enough, one person, usually the woman in this time, these types of situations, take that personally. Like, you don't love me as much. And that's why you're not changing fast. That's why you're not doing, you just don't care about this marriage. Well, I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you, and I'm going to, file divorce, right? And then what usually happens is the woman, it's hard to say because I've had it on both sides. Okay, I can't say all women are all men, but what I will say is the children are always used as the weapon. It's the negotiation weapon, right? And for instance, if someone goes to, say, an attorney, and I would say 95% of the attorneys out there, they don't care about your family. I did, because I went to law school later in life after I got screwed by the system. So my whole reason for going to law school was because I refused to ever rely on one of these jerk-off attorneys again. So that's why I became a lawyer. But I'll tell you right now, 95% of them out there, very, very, very rarely are you going to get an attorney that truly wants the best for you and your family. What they want a lot of times, maybe they don't even realize this, they want the conflict because the conflict pays their bills. And people out there, don't follow the money. Use common sense. This is not something that, if you look at this, what the attorney didn't know you from yesterday, right? Now they know you, and now they know that you're going to pay them. Do you think they want your case settled like that? Do you think they want you guys to be amicable, together, so that the case can get, settled in a month and you guys can move on? The attorneys, they're not going to make money that way. And people need to understand this, that I would say 9 times out of 10, the attorneys are going to drum up the conflict. And that is sad, because what they do is they'll play into your feelings. They'll play into, your anger. And they'll want to almost present as if they share this anger. But again, I wouldn't trust it. The only attorney I would trust is one that says settle, and let's settle fast, and let's keep your family from enduring, a year-long divorce that leaves your family so damaged that you'll hate this person throughout the rest of your life. If an attorney has brought you to that point in a divorce, I don't care if they positioned you better and they got you more money. If you walked away hating your spouse worse than you did prior to filing, right before you filed divorce, that's not a good thing. That's not a good thing, because now for your kids, the remainder of your children's childhood, you have to co-parent with this person. And that resentment, you will always remember that divorce and that horrible custody battle and everything else that comes with it. And then again, who's really benefiting here, right? Financially, the attorneys. Okay. So first and foremost, guys, be very careful about, if you are getting a divorce, how much you really want to fight for custody. Okay. I had a friend, she got a divorce, and she was a stay-at-home mom. She had a child that had a disability. And prior to this, she had her college degree and she was making great money. Very talented writer. She worked for a publishing company and everything else. But when she had this child, she wanted to stay home, and then she started to work part-time. Well, her whole position in her divorce was, and she was fairly young at this time, not when I say fairly young, I know many out there like 18, I'm not talking 18. When I say fairly young, I'm talking someone in their 30s, okay, where they still have, years and years of a career. But she was so angry, and she at this point had just decided that's it, and she wasn't married that long, but she never wanted to work a day in her life again. See, I took on a different position because I went through a divorce, and I said, I never want to rely on this person again. I want to make my own money. I never want to rely. That didn't mean that I didn't need alimony, to kind of like bridge in the gap alimony to get me from point A to point B. But at that point, I was in my 20s when I got a divorce. And for me, the last thing I wanted was to position my life and my fight about how much alimony I could get, because I just really wanted to be, the last thing I wanted to be was reliant on the person that I was divorcing. I wanted to be as far away from relying. I didn't want to have to go back to court when he didn't give me alimony and keep fighting him for the rest of my life. Now, that's different from, I guess, when you're in your 50s and you're divorcing, or 60s and you're divorcing, 70s, whatever. It's not like you have that opportunity like you did in your 20s to go and get a career. So my position on older women is a lot different than it is on the younger woman that gets divorced. Okay, just for there's reasons, and I can get into that on another live. But the point is that, to me, I didn't want that reliance, but some people do. And, you got to really think about, where do you want your life to be? Because do you really, if you can't get along with them, do you really want to be reliant on them paying you every month? Okay. Because I'll tell you too, I've had cases where a girl she's younger and she gets alimony, and then he gets a job, his job goes down, he doesn't make as much, and he just stops paying her alimony, right? So now what does she have to do to get him to pay? Well, she has to try to go fight this out in court, all right? And then the laws in Florida, are, if somebody does, take a substantial dive in their income, that's a defense for paying alimony at the rate that, they were going to have to pay it, right? So then she ends up going to try to enforce this alimony. She's stuck in litigation for another 2 years. I mean, your life becomes hell. You're just sitting in litigation upon year after year after year after year. Same thing with parental alienation cases. It's, and it's so sad and so ridiculous. And I'll tell you this right now. when I was practicing, I predominantly took a lot of parental alienation cases, people that just, after the divorce, one parent thought they had power and control. And they actually, some of them were semi-delusional because they literally legitimately thought their ex-spouse was nuts or whatever they wanted to label them as. And it's funny because like the rest of the world didn't see it, but in their eyes, that's who they are. And that's their reality. And they really, really believed that. So when they were withholding the child, they truly believed they were protecting this child. But here's what I just never understood. I never understood how you could say spend 10 years married to somebody. You decide you're gonna have children with this person, right? They were okay to bear your children. They were okay to stay with for 10 years. And for whatever reason, you guys get divorced, right? And the minute you file, guess what? Usually, in my experience, the man was always the abuser. He was always the domestic violence abuser. And listen, I'm not going to negate that that doesn't happen because that does happen. But what I'm saying is he was okay yesterday, but tomorrow, today, not anymore. He's far different. Or on the other side, it was okay that this mother bared your children, but now the day you guys divorced, she is mentally ill, right? So it's like, these are very common allegations made from different genders that I saw all the time. And the thing is that when you go and you file that initial petition for dissolution, you have a choice on the direction, because this is where it all starts. When you want to talk years down the line of a legal mess, when you have a choice, to just say, let's be fair, let's split everything, and let's be equal parents in our children's lives. Or you have a choice to allege, well, I want primary and I want my soon-to-be ex to have supervised visitation. I want all these restrictions because I want them to get psychologically evaluated, or I want them to go to anger management because, why not? You're so angry at this time when you go to file. You want to hurt them. And the sad thing is you walk into an attorney's office and ching, 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 that's what the attorney starts thinking. Whoa, you get a custody battle going on. Oh, let's put this allegation. Why don't we make him get this done and make him or her get that done? And now when that person answers the petition, guess what happens, right? Now they're throwing balls back at you, you're throwing back at them. Now you're on the defense, the trust is broken, even though you're trying and you're saying to yourself, why don't you and I talk and get the attorneys out of this mess, right? At this point, the trust is broken. You're scared to death. Am I being set up now? Am I being set up by having this conversation? Am I gonna have to go to court now and they're gonna use that conversation against me, right? And that it all starts with the petition you file. And I can tell you right now, I will never advise, when I practiced, never advise to have somebody make those types of allegations unless I very much explained what territory they're going to be living in for a long time. And it's not just after the divorce finalizes. It will continue, I promise you. I would always advise, look, okay, we need to be fair. I know, things didn't work out. I know you're angry, but you've got to try to get through this process and transition to starting your life over, not adding more memories of anger and hate. And that's what some divorces do to people. They already take an escalated situation and they compound it bigger and bigger and bigger until you're in a full-blown custody battle. And then what happens, then the mudslinging is they're throwing this allegation, you're throwing that allegation, they're hiring this person, you're hiring that person. And you walk, at the end of the day, somebody has destroyed one person enough that you don't see these situations go equally, peacefully. One person's always going to win or lose. It becomes a win or lose situation. And then the divorce happens and the person that's lost, now they are pissed and they're going to come back for vengeance later. I promise you that. Because I've seen this time and time again where one person prevails at the final judgment of a divorce. A couple years later, because that person's hanging out, the person that doesn't prevail, they're hanging out waiting. They're watching that parent that prevailed. They're waiting for that parent that prevailed to screw up so they can pounce on them and they can grab the power back. And it becomes a ping pong match. And it will remain a ping pong match until that child ages out. And what's even scarier is if you have a disabled child, because it never ends. Never ends. If you have a child with a severe disability, after 18, you're co-parenting for the rest of that child's life. I've had parents explain to me, who've gone through these crazy custody battles, and they've come out on the other end. They said it's like a prison sentence the rest of their life. That's what they feel like. They are forever indebted to this person. And they become so paranoid they can't even check emails because their anxiety. It's like PTSD. All these things come back, and it's just a ping pong match. My biggest piece of advice to anybody out there: I don't care how angry you are. If your spouse did the most horrendous things to you during your marriage that led you to finally take that plunge to leave that marriage, be very, very careful how and what type of divorce you're going to conduct. Okay. because I'm telling you, in my experience as a former family law attorney, any post-dissolution case, which are usually the alienation cases, any post-divorce case that has been going on and on and on for years, you can always go back to that docket and you can always go to that first petition and you can always read it. And it will always have the language of, I want majority, this parent's mental, this parent has anger problems, they need an evaluation. When you start all of that, let me just tell you that divorce isn't those legal problems aren't ending. And guess what? You can go back in your time. The reason I became a divorce is I look back at all the money I spent, okay? Because I did go through that contentious custody battle. And I look back going, oh my God, how much money did I spend? How aggravating. And trust me, what I'm telling you, it happened to me. And I just finally said, I can't keep paying attorneys. I might as well just take that money and pay for an education for myself. So I always have the knowledge the rest of my life. I don't like relying on people, right? Especially attorneys. So I'm just saying, you guys have got to be like, really careful and in that capacity when that's happening. And it will mess your kids up. We were talking, I was somewhere the other day and I had this conversation. Maybe it was a podcast I was doing in another show. But anyways, make a long story short, what I noticed is, say that the father is alleging the mother's mentally ill. And usually when he alleges this, the kids will always hear it later. The father will have a conversation with the kids that the mother's mentally ill. He will, tell the kids their mother's mentally ill, and he'll always spin it like it's something negative. Now, there are people out there that legitimately have mental illnesses, okay? And, that's their problem. It's nothing to be ashamed of. It's not their fault. Some people have chemical imbalances. But the sad thing is you have a child growing up that's offspring, that's genetic of somebody with a mental illness. There's a high probability that child could genetically inherit a mental illness. And now you had one parent feeding their head the whole time about how it's wrong and their mom's, doesn't deserve this or doesn't deserve to be listened to because she's crazy. What do you think that's going to do to a child? And what if they are struggling inside, but they're too afraid to tell you? So, then the next thing you know, you have a child committing suicide. They don't feel safe and not judged. You gotta be, people live, if you guys really look at it, people, a lot of times they live in the result of their choices. They really do. And they don't even realize it. They don't even realize it because they're too busy blaming everybody else out there. Blame, 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 blame. Let me tell you, a lot of times it takes two to tango. A lot. So it might, maybe some other person has, contributed to the problem a little bit higher than the other person, but nobody's perfect, right? Nobody's perfect. So you be very, very careful about, again, what you are teaching your kids, those that have gotten divorced and that have animosity towards their ex. Be very careful because it will come back and it will bite you in the butt, okay? And you will suffer the consequences later in life. That kid might grow up and revert that judgment back on you. Or that kid might grow up and say, you know what, I remember when you said all these things about my other parent. And now they're angry, right? They're angry at you because now they've reached to a certain point where they can see through it. And, it's really sad. And when I did my parental alienation, when I was practicing in that area of law and I was handling all these parental alienation cases, everybody in the sun would come to me. I am being alienated. My ex is a narcissist, blah, 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 blah. And I will tell you this. Not everybody that came to me ended up being alienated. And I discovered that a lot of people, and I'm not saying, I would say it was about a 50-50. 50% of the people come into me telling me they were alienated were actually the perpetrators. They were the narcissists, in my opinion. And how I could tell that, because I would see how they treated other people. I'd see how they treated me. I pick up on subtleties. And then I started to see their character come out. And I thought to myself, well, if they're like this with me, and they're like this with that person and that person, then there's a high probability they might have been like this with this person. And then you end up finding out that they were not the true victim. But then there was those that were truly alienated. And that was very sad. Okay, that was very sad because that was a result of being with a very narcissistic person who was very delusional. Because I noticed people that were true victims of alienation, their ex actually delusionally saw them like nobody else in the world saw them. Only their ex saw them this way. But their ex believed it. And that's what's scary. They actually believed that this person was like this, no matter what they were doing, no matter how anybody else saw them. And that was scary. That was very scary. And I felt horrible for those parents because they, it's just a very sad situation. So, it's a hit or miss. But again, like I will say, if you've come to that fork in the road where you have finally decided you cannot sustain the marriage anymore, the smartest thing that you can do for yourself and for your kids is decide on how to divorce in a manner that is not going to add to the anger, the hate, the animosity, the convictions, the judgment, the retaliation. So be very careful what you allege about another person because they will defend themselves and it will become a ping pong match. And any attorney that's going to take your case, not tell you the pros and cons, not tell you the money that's going to be spent, the length. Now, because if you just did a simple divorce and you came to a settlement agreement, you could be done in a couple months. They don't tell you these custody battles can go for 2 to 4 years. And, and all the money that you're going to spend. And even after the final judgment, you're going to be back in court because nobody's happy with the final judgment because one person wins, one person loses, and usually the power, control, balance, because these people can't get along. They can't make them equal. Court has to go like that, right? So this person's always going to be waiting until they bring you back into court. So the best thing, like I said, the best thing that you can do is to take your pride, take your anger, and actually grow as a human being. And that is hard. That's hard because you have a fresh wound. And listen, people out there, I am not by any means dismissing your pain and what led you to have to get a divorce. Okay. It's a horrible place. I don't think anybody gets married thinking that I'm going to get a divorce. And it's a sad situation, especially if you have kids. I don't see it as, something that nobody's winning regardless, but you've got to be super careful on how you sever that legal tie. Okay. And here's something that's very crazy. I just learned the other day, because I do, at this point now, I do legal consulting, and I actually prep attorneys outside. I help them with appeals and their trial work. And, I do a lot of family law cases. I do guardianship cases and, all of that good stuff, because I now work behind the scenes, which I actually like. But I did love trial. I love trial work, but I work behind the scenes now. But my point being, and I think I just forgot, I've been doing this. So I was researching case law. And this is in the state of Florida. I was researching case law, and it said that a court, once you file a divorce, say that the husband and the wife do work out a settlement agreement on visitation that they're both comfortable with, but if the court finds one of the parents unfit, the court has the power to bypass the parents' agreement, and the court can impose restrictions on one of those parents from their kids. So when you file, you now bring the court in, and I stay away from the court. It's not a happy place to be. It's not a good place to be. Okay. So if you can work out a settlement agreement with a divorce, right, and then just file it and just get it going, because you got to figure this: why would the court think that a parent was unfit? Because the allegations that you guys are alleging. So if you want the court to stay the heck out of your business, don't put destructive allegations, because they could actually bypass you and bypass your spouse, and they could take over your children. And that's a very, very, very scary place. Very scary place to allow the court that, to have that sort of power. Okay. So, again, I'm trying to think, because there's a lot that I could tell you. I mean, I talk about CPS and child services. Don't even get me started on there. Like, you want to talk injustice and you want to talk anger, I think I'm going to talk about that tonight. The whole CPS thing, and I can tell you how they do it, and I can tell you why they do it, and I can tell you the injustices to be had with that whole setup. But that's another topic for another day. But family, like I said, family court, no court is fun. No court is good. And even if you have grounds to sue somebody, I've done things before where I have been, had people say things about me. And what I've done is I filed a lawsuit and then I withdrew it, but I filed it to get it on the record, just as, because it becomes public record at that point. So if I'm being defamed or something, I can file it just enough to, if you look my name up, you can see, whatever. And then I withdraw it because I don't want to go through the court system after that. I just don't trust the court system. And that was being a former lawyer. I just don't trust the court system whatsoever. It's not just. And I am happy to break it down and tell you why. But it's not the system I thought. I feel like America lied to me my whole life. I feel like our justice system is destroying our children and families, very much so. I can explain that to you in another day, exactly how they're destroying our families and children. And, if you guys haven't watched the whole thing going on with Wendy Williams, who's now in a guardianship, and Britney Spears, who was in a guardianship, if the court hasn't taken your kids from you, wait till you're in your retirement years and you've acquired an estate and you've acquired retirement funds. They'll come in, they'll take your property, and they can do it to anybody. And they can do it because they have court-appointed doctors who will find you incapacitated, and then the state grabs your federal funds from your SSI and all kinds of stuff. That's a whole nother ballgame we can get into sometime. But like I said, family courts, guys, do not let your anger take over, because you're never going to win. The court's going to win. The attorneys are going to win. But you, your children, you're going to lose. Even if you think you won for the moment, you're going to lose. Nobody wins in family court, is in my experience. And if you think you won, you've won until your now pissed off spouse who lost finds a reason to come back after you. All right, so I'm gonna let you guys go. I'm gonna let you guys go, but I'm gonna try to come back on tonight. I've got a couple podcasts. I was in trial this morning, so in family law, doing consulting. But anyway, so I felt compelled to come on and talk, right? Because I just feel like you guys need to know these things. And, you know, what a better person to tell you than someone who's on the other side, right? living these cases day in and day out. But anyways, I'm going to come back on. I'm thinking like 9:30 tonight. So I'm going to discuss a whole nother thing. In my 9:30 show is going to be called Lawyer Leslie Live, right? So I'm not sure what topic I want to talk about, but feel free if you guys want topics. Now, this is not legal advice for you. This is my experience telling you my experience with the system, my experience with why I think there's injustice, which I have that education and experience to explain. It's not, you know, each case and each person's life is different. So understand that, okay? But if you guys have a topic that you want to know more information on, I am happy to do a live on that. You just message me and say, hey, Legally Leslie, it's my new name. I have Lawyer Leslie, Legally Leslie. You say, hey, can you give me some information about this? You know, or what do you think about that? Now, I'm not going to